Journeys Ahead, Chapter 8, To the Source. Written and narrated by Tsproart. Opening with a sharp crackle, Void's portal shimmered the life within the world he had never intended to return to. The spark didn't rush out, didn't jump or flip in a grand entrance. He merely walked with clenched fists and stoic steps that fell to a silent call. Entering Salvaheim with his hood up, the spark took in a long breath and gazed upon his once beautiful home that now looked to be the land of the dead. The fires from the purge have been long since dead, leaving behind the graying dark remnants of homes, tall buildings, and vehicles. Cold and lifeless grass blew in the wind, while ash and mist carried itself across the spark's feet. The air felt to be as cold as ice, a stinging, prickly feeling that made Void shiver within his soul. Looking up, the spark could see that the sky had returned to a deep blue shade, but had the visible presence of static and sparking glitching textures. It all looked wrong. The clouds weren't normal anymore, and the stars had long since been vaporized to dust. Inhaling with a sharp breath, the spark gazed his sight back forward, seeing a bright light in the distance. What looked to have been a beacon of sorts shimmered a bright, pulsating white hue, looking to be calling towards the spark himself. Although far, Void knew that within his soul, that was where he needed to go. With furrowed eyes, he began the march ahead, leaving behind an ashy footprint trail in the dirt. As he walked, the spark caught the sight of old metal bodies without heads or interiors, just the exoskeleton remains of sparks that had withered the time. Some were laid across the ash-filled streets, while limbs and other parts had been strewn across buildings or dangled from dead trees and statues. Void's skin began to crawl with unease as he tried not to look at the remains. For all Void knew, they could have been people he had known when he was a kid. Friends, family. It made him want to puke, knowing that he could very well be the last of his race. And if he were to die, it would mean extinction. Void then stepped on something soft with an audible squeak. Looking down, he caught the sight of an old, rotting stuffed animal. It looked to be a pink bunny with 3 ears and goofy-looking eyes, clearly a little girl's toy. Kneeling down, the spark lifted the old and raggy toy up from the ground, proceeding to brush it off while holding back tears. In that moment, it truly dawned on him just how much was lost. Not just men and women, but children too. Pets, history, everything that the sparks were, was no more. Closing his eyes, Void let small trickles of tears drop and plop onto the stuffed animal, wondering who it had belonged to.
Welcome home, Nova Sun.
The raspy voice called once again, this time coming from the light in the far distance. Standing up with a flinch, Void dropped the stuffed animal back to the dirt and gazed over towards the light that had sat in between mountains. Face dropping to a scowl, the spark craned his gaze with a furrowed brow, proceeding to ask with clenched teeth,
"Who are you?"
A cold, wailing chill coursed across the world, making Void shiver once more, and with it, carried the same voice asking a familiar question.
"Who am I? Who are you?"
It asked in a snake-like tone.
"Why come back to this place? Why?"
The voice trailed off with whispers and croaks, leaving Void to continue on with his march, although now seeing shadows of glitches peeking around corners and crevices, watching him like curious dogs. "Take a good guess," Void barked with heavy footfalls. "Take a nice, long guess." Distant groans and stutters went off around Void's sides, as he knew he was going to be jumped sooner rather than later. But in his current mindset, he was almost begging for it to happen.
"I know why you are here. You are planning to try and stop the inevitable. A one-man army, as they say.
The voice replied, speaking from afar, yet sounding so very close.
Of every realm and reality we have erased, never have we encountered such a soul. A true fighter, but with a petty revenge tale.
Scoffing, Void deployed his battle axe as the sounds of movement began to get louder and louder from all around.
What do you think you'll find if you succeed in your meaningless task? What peace will await you once this is done? What comfort will you indulge in once the dust settles? You can't bring back what has been lost, Novason. You are fighting a meaningless war alone.
With a huff, Void stopped in his tracks and took in a long breath. Sweat dripped down his brow and tears streamed down his face. The voice was going to make him crack, break the walls of having a calm and mindful sight, but it just continued on.
You are selfish, self-entitled. No matter what you say, no matter how much pride you claim to hold for others, we all know that this is more for you rather than anyone else. You just want vengeance. Admit it, child. This whole crusade is just for you.
Looking down, Void gripped his weapon hard as glitches began to emerge from the fog and ash. Every type could be seen then, every single one of them. Looking back to the light, Void blinked away his tears before retorting aloud. In the beginning, you would be right about that. The spark agreed as all the glitches slowly began to close in. But, in my search for that vengeance, I've come to realize that this isn't just about me. Void continued as he prepared for the approaching fight. This is about everyone and everything you monsters have taken from so many people. And I am not alone. The spark finished as his mother's battle mask deployed sharply around his face.
We'll see about that. When we're finished with you, we'll erase that friend of yours and her entire world off the face of this mess of a story.
The voice boomed one last time as Void prepared to make his move. Oh, I don't think so. All at once, the glitches rushed the spark in a violent force. Polychromes, mimics, unstables, and many of the others at the same time. With his left arm, the spark activated his Nova Blade and quickly began the assault. Swinging with his sword and axe, Void ignited their sharp edges to their full power and began cleaving through the glitches left and right. With quick steps, the spark decapitated several in a fast blow, and then disarmed a few at his side as they leapt and reached for his head. As more continued to attack, Void ran forward and leapt upwards with a clean slash. As several of the monsters were split and then kicked apart, Void dropped back down, plunging his blades into the skull of an unstable glitch. Once the killing blow was dealt, the spark leapt off and sliced the Sour Claw in half using full force. Kicking off its body, Void flipped backwards and landed himself back down with a powerful slash in his axe, creating a shockwave of energy to blow some of the glitches away. Standing back to his feet with a grunt, the spark released an angered snarl and retracted his melee weapons. Within a flash, both his hands were formed into their blaster forms in a sharp sting of blue. As the glitches charged once again, Void began to rotate his torso and arms around at a violent speed. From their barrels fired out round after round of blue, glowing protonic charges that went about in all angles. The blaster fire came as a shining light show of sapphire, glimmering hot shades of blue that went around and around, putting holes and wounds into the monstrosities that had plagued him for years. Once the blaster fire ceased, Void was instantly jumped by a stable glitch, then another and another, a polychrome and even a Sour Claw. They had begun to dogpile the spark. Underneath the growing number of glitches, Void clenched his teeth and his blue hues began to change into a rage-fired red. His eyes sparked to life with the same color as he bellowed a scream in pent-up frustration. From his rounded horns shimmered to life a fiery glow and pulsated out a sharp blast of energy. A bubble-like shockwave erupted in the shape of a spherical Nova rune, sending the glitches high into the air in several pieces. As their bodies fell, Void returned to his regular burning blue and gazed towards the light. More glitches were coming, but a pathway was opened. Redeploying his blades, the Spark huffed once more and began the charge, all the while bellowing a cry that he had held in for oh so long. Tilting the kettle pot, Nock poured Jaida a nice warm cup of tea as she sat at his work table, poking away at a plate of uneaten food. A blue early morning sky shimmered in through the broken open garage door that had now been taped over with a translucent plastic. The light from outside cast a gentle glow upon the musician, who looked down in the dumps. Sitting across from her with his own plate of food, Nock looked upon his sister with an uneasy gaze, unsure of what to say, but he had to try. Jaida, it wasn't your decision to make. It was his. The nerdy-looking mechanic stated as he took a bite from his dish. Looking up with her head rested upon her right hand, Jaida couldn't help but sigh with a dissatisfied gaze. I understand that. Trust me, I do. I wish he didn't just drop that so suddenly. But then again, I don't know what was going on through his head in that moment. She replied, taking a little nibble from her plate. You said he was having a panic attack about the past, so it could have been a lot of things. Besides, it wasn't like he kicked you out without reason. He just wanted to protect you. If what you told me is how it actually went down, that is. The mechanic returned, now taking a sip from his own cup of tea. Well, yeah, of course that's how it went. I just wish he had a little bit more faith in me is all. After everything that happened and what we did, I thought that maybe for once, Jaida cut off her trail of thought before looking down in a tired expression. I just wanted to help. Sitting upright, Nock took a napkin and cleaned his face off, while nodding in an understanding gesture. And that you did, he added before looking into her white eyes. Look, Jaida, just don't beat yourself up over it. You're not a screw-up. You've never been. Flicking her head up, Jaida scoffed with a quick, Sure, bro, sure. Leaning back in her seat, she began to list off several mistakes that she had made within the past few years, tapping each finger as she did so. Let's see, the city hates the Phantom. I always end up causing damage. I dropped out of college. I haven't made any friends besides Void. Even then, I think I just weirded him out half the time. I swear, I've never seen someone just so... Jaida leaned forward, placing both her hands on her head, groaning in the midst. I think he just wasn't ready for someone like me to enter his life. Sure, he acted happy, but what if he was just trying to be nice? What if none of it mattered? What if... Jaida, stop. You're overthinking yourself. Nock interrupted with a dour look. Be honest with yourself. If he had truly thought that way, you would have been sent back here in let's see. Ah yes, not an entire week later. Nock explained, rolling his eyes. Look, I get it. You wanted to be there for a big cool spaceman. To have that mindset of trying to help. To have a sense of purpose, I guess. I understand that mindset of trying to help. Trust me. But I believe you've done your part. I think Void knows that too. Nock finished, taking another bite from his food. I mean, I guess you're right. I just hope he's... okay. Jaida trailed off as what sounded to be a distant cry echoed within her mind. Her face fell still as a deep sense of some kind of connection coursed within her, a sudden calling that sent her nerves on alert and caused her hair to flash a bright glow. Jaida? You okay? Nock asked as the musician stared blank-faced right through him. I don't... The sound suddenly came again within her mind, a sharp and shrill voice. It sounded like Void, yelling and fighting. As the sound came again, Jaida's skin flickered with the constellation patterns, quickly catching both her and Nock's attention. Whoa, are you good? The little mechanic asked as Jaida slowly stood from the table. She didn't know what to make of it. She couldn't tell whether it had just been her mind or something more. But in some way, shape, and form, she heard Void sounding desperate and full of rage. Void, I can hear him. Jaida stated aloud, making Nock's head instantly turn. You can what? He questioned while Jaida's skin continued to pulsate and shimmer with energy. He's fighting and so very angry. Jaida slurred her words as she stumbled a tad from the sudden pulses of power within. Whoa, hey, easy. Nock stammered as he leapt from his seat and propped up Jaida to the best of his abilities. How is this? How can I? It then clicked for Jaida. Void was going berserk within the center of a multiversal constellation, expelling energy and destroying monsters at the core of it all. Jaida then began to question. Could she have been linked to all forms of star matter? How? Nock, he's in trouble. I can sense it. He's getting hurt. Bad. Jaida explained, holding her head tightly. How can you know? Nock appropriately questioned as Jaida stood back to her full height. Salvaheim, it's in the center of that constellation pattern I told you about. I don't know, but I can feel it. I can feel the world in battle. I can sense Void, the glitches. It's like it just came to life, but I don't understand how. Jaida's constellation patterns had now begun to glow and surge with a constant flow of energy, as the cause of multiversal constellation's core dimension was flooded with life and activity. Nock, I don't understand. How is this possible? Jaida asked, looking for some sort of answer. Thinking for a long moment, Nock scratched his chin in deep thought before the light bulb erupted in his mind. Wait, Jaida, when you warp, it defies the laws of physics of time and space, right? Nock asked, with a finger pointed towards her. It's just a theory, because I practically break through the world's layers to get from point A to point B. Why you ask? Jaida returned, raising an eyebrow. Okay, a little bit crazy, but technically speaking, wouldn't that mean your essence transcends beyond the reality barrier? If you really are warping through space and time itself, wouldn't that mean you technically bypass, After a moment, Jaida realized what Nock was getting at, proceeding to finish the words for him. That I might connect to all constellations beyond our own? Looking down to her hands, Jaida continued to hear Void and the glitches echo within her mind. It slowly dawned upon her that she herself could very well have been a multiversal being such as Void. Her powers. He was right about them. Cosmic fire. There was much to learn. Oh, Void. She whimpered before looking back up to Nock. I gotta help him. Tilting his head and crossing his arms, the small mechanic rose an eyebrow and asked, how do you plan to do that exactly? Turning to her guitar upon the floor, Jaida propped it open and yanked her phantom cloak out into the light, proceeding to don it over herself in a quick manner. If what you theorize is true, then shouldn't that mean with enough momentum I could warp to other worlds? Jaida asked, looking back to her brother. Technically speaking, yes. But Jaida, you can't maintain enough energy to even warp a mile. How do you plan to jump between worlds and let alone find a Savheim? Nock asked in a fair question. Looming down to her swirling forms, Jaida could feel an ever-present energy connecting her to all the stars in the multiverse. It was as though Salvaheim itself had become the energy source to it all. Its sudden surge of activity seemed to bring the entire constellation system to life in a sense. Perhaps the species name Sparks had more merit than she or even Void realized. I don't know, but I have to try. He needs me, Jaida stated, looking towards the sky. After a moment of thinking, Nock blinked and slowly nodded towards Jaida, seeing her determined flare to try. Well, we already know that I can't stop you. So, if you do somehow manage to get there. Nock trailed off as he walked over and adjusted Jaida's cloak to a more clean posture. Tell whoever is in charge of those freaks that they owe me a new printer. With a smile, Jaida leaned down and gave Nock a tight hug, leading to the mechanic to grasp back as well. Noted. She replied with a small laugh before letting go. I'll be back. I promise. Within the blink of an eye, Jaida warped herself away from Nock, leaving himself alone once again in the workshop. Never gonna stop worrying about that girl, he said, looking at a bunch of parts on the floor. Maybe one day I could build like a suit or something, he mumbled, thinking on the idea to one day tag along. Maybe one day, he said again before heading back to finish his plate of food. Warping to a city rooftop, Jaida let the sun beam down upon her in a hopeful light. Staring on, she gazed upon the rows of rooftops that she would jump between every night, now knowing that she had to make the most of her energy to build momentum if she were to try and reach the spark. Kneeling down, the Phantom of Aurora City let the wind blow her hood and cloak back, almost making it look as though she were wearing a cape. Hang on, Void, Jaida muttered as she got down like a runner preparing for a 100-meter sprint. In that moment, Jaida didn't need to muster any form of energy, for it had been coursing through her form at an ever-expanding speed. All that she needed was at her fingertips. Even if she didn't have the boost, her love for the spark would have been enough to at least try. Okay, into 1, into 2, into 1, 2, 3, 4. Kicking off, Jaida began to sprint and warp between rooftops at a rapid pace. Between each gap she teleported through, the musician focused all of her attention upon Void. Somehow, deep within her soul, it told her that if that's what she held focus upon, she would find her way to Salvaheim. Void's words then rang out within her head. All the advice, all the lessons he gave. Follow your heart, she told herself, as the heart guided her path towards him. Warping again and again, Jaida found that with each surge of transport, the subspace seemed to get more and more enlightened. A trail of stardust and burning footprints were now being left behind as Jaida began to move faster than ever before. The top center of her hair turned into a space black hue, while the gray around her irises shifted into an orange color. The constellations under her skin then began to swirl and change pattern, as Jaida's muscles and limbs then began to glow and shimmer with such force that her skeleton could be partially seen beneath. The musician soon found herself to be warping in long yard-lengthened jumps. Her sense of gravity began to deplete as the burning power within began to take form. Her chest and legs soon began to burn, but she couldn't stop now. Void needed her, and in a sense, she needed him. The spark had given the musician a new look upon life. He had been a true friend that didn't judge her upon first glance, a soul that gave her a chance to try. He had saved her the night they met, and now she was going to return the favor in full. That sense of love alone was enough to drive her forward. Hang on, Blue, she muttered before warping once more, but this time not heading to the next rooftop, rather disappearing from Aurora itself. Within one more flash, the Phantom of Aurora City had left the dimension. With a harsh slash, Void continued to swing his weapons with a burning soul. Static blood flew through the air, along with crackling limbs after every blow. The spark could only see red as he refused to hold his punches. He fought with such force that some of the stabled glitches had fled from the scene. The light source wasn't too far off now. If he kept pushing, then he would make it. Just a bit further, he told himself. Just a bit further. That thought, however, was cut short as a polychrome approached from behind and clawed the spark hard. From the strike, Void fell face first into the ashy stone, having only his mother's battle mask to be the thing that saved him from shattered teeth.
Foolish spark,
the polychrome cried as it drug a dagger-like arm along the ground. Turning around upon the floor, Void rose his right arm up and changed its form into a blaster, preparing to fire upon the approaching monster. When from behind shimmered a bright light alongside a sense of warmth. Turning around, the spark as well as the polychrome washed as an orange light began to shimmer within the air. Stardust flaked off its form before a swirl of tiny constellations emerged in a spiraling shape, when from its essence exploded out the flailing form of Jaida. The guitarist sounded to have been yelling for a good while as her body crashed into the polychrome, destroying it upon a fiery impact. What the hell? Void cried in shock as he got back to his feet while watching Jaida crash and roll across the ground. Freckles? He yelled, now quickly running to her aid. Slowly getting up on her hands and knees, the musician craned her head upwards and looked at the world around herself, instantly entranced within its dour atmosphere. Gazing back down, her eyes lit up with life as the form of Void slid upon his knees right towards her. Jaida? He shouted in disbelief as he stopped, kneeling beside her. Void! She cried back with a relieved face. Gently taking her by the hands, Void slid back to his feet and retracted his mask to gaze upon her. Jaida, in response, stood up as well and met the spark's stunned set of eyes. She then leaned in and gave him a tight hug. Void, are you okay? She asked before pulling back. Blinking in astonishment, Void gazed from Jaida and then to her, what he assumed to be, fading portal. Jaida, what are you doing here? How are you here? Void asked with wide eyes as he whirled his head back around. After this, glitches slowly began to reappear from the fog. I'm here because of you, dum-dum! Jaida replied as slow, heavy footfalls of the monsters came from all around. Reacting on instinct, the two of them quickly went back to back, staring upon the beast that surrounded them. I told you to stay back! Void barked, readying his blades. And I did just that, until you and your friends started causing activity here. I think your actions awoke Salvaheim in a way, and since apparently it's the center of the constellations, it gave me full power. I'm technically a multiversal being too. I just found that out a couple minutes ago. Jaida replied in a long, drawn-out explanation that made the spark raise his eyebrow. That's intriguing. The spark replied while gazing upon the glitches, all the while still wondering on how it all connected to Salvaheim as a whole. Blue, look, I'm sorry for disobeying your wishes, but I'm gonna help you see this through whether you like it or not. I won't abandon you. Jaida remarked, summoning sharp blades of fire to her hands, leaving her surprised at the new form. Look, all I want is for you to be safe, Jaida. If you're gonna do this, stay close and follow my word. Please. Void replied as he looked over his shoulder with tender eyes. Of course. Now what's the plan? Jaida asked as the glitches made their charge. Keep fighting till we reach that light. Void answered as he gestured to the glowing light in the distance. Quickly nodding, Jaida and Void focused upon their enemies, now rushing back and engaging the fight. Running side by side towards the massive light, the two of them began to slice and dice their way through the horde of glitches in an almost unison type fashion. Twirling, Jaida slashed with her energy daggers, while Void switched between his blades and arm cannons. As the spark shot with fury, Jaida warped into the air and kicked a stable glitch's head clean off. Rolling below, Void shot and eradicated the legs of a few larger glitches within their path. Gusts of blue and orange erupted from all around, as the duo practically began to work as one powerful force of nature. With a fast warp, Jaida flung Void into the air, allowing for him to cleave and destroy a few Hellhawks in the sky. While landing back below, Jaida spun and slashed, trying to mimic what Void would do with his own blades. She flipped and kicked with all her might, as her maroon cloak blew in the wind. Her body now looked like a light show with all the moving stars and lines beneath her skin. Salvaheim's energy, whatever it had been, was acting as an almost constant battery for the guitarist. There was no rest needed, no delay in energy. Jaida felt as though she could move mountains with her powers. It made her feel truly alive. Landing back down with his drill attack, Void eliminated a Sourclaw before rolling back to his feet. Together again, the two of them continued to sprint their way towards the light, even giving one another a high five mid-stride. So, let me get this straight. You believe that because me and the glitches, when we started fighting, it quote-unquote awoke Salvaheim and your energy? Void questioned, still confused as to how Jaida had gotten there. On God, I both heard you and these freaks fighting in my mind. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, I was just drawn here, I suppose. Jaida replied as she blew a gust of fire to her side, melting away a set of glitches. With Salvaheim somehow being the core to all the constellations, I guess that would make sense. But that would have to mean that your cosmic fire, it must have had to come from a different reality. Void returned as he blasted several other glitches to smithereens. Well, as in your words, one question is answered and another takes its place. Jaida returned while slashing a glitch down the middle. What? No, not really. All we have are assumptions. Nothing has been answered. Void retorted as the two of them delivered a combo blow, Void firing his blasters and Jaida with another gust of fire, clearing an open pathway towards the light. Either way, you gotta admit it's pretty cool. Jaida replied as she gazed back at the spark with a wink. As Void looked at the expression, he couldn't help but smile. Through it all, Jaida still found a way to make him feel like himself again. She truly was the light in his life. Well, don't forget who did it first. He replied with a smug grin as they both ran towards the light, which was glowing out of a fairly large crater in the ground. We're almost there. Keep moving. Void bellowed as they both sprinted hard on their feet, while the horde of glitches began to rush in from behind. Is that a portal? Jaida asked as they neared, seeing a swirling energy within what they now realized to have been a force-open crater, rather than a natural one. Visible claw marks and potholes lined the ledge of the hole, showing that it had been dug open, most definitely by the beasts. But why? Either way, that's where we need to go. Turning, Void extended his hand out to Jaida in a quick mannered gesture. Upon seeing this, the musician nodded and took it, locking her 4 fingers around the sparks in a tight hold. What looked to be hundreds of glitches seemed to be rushing in for the two star-crossed heroes, and Void knew that he had to move fast, right here, right now. You trust me, right? The spark asked as they neared the glowing form of energy. Always. Jaida shouted back with a half smile. Good, Void returned as he scooped the musician up in his arms and sent his battle mask over his face. Hold on tight. Void cried as he took a hard lunge and leapt forward and over the massive crater. Eyes widening behind the mask, Jaida shoved her head into the spark's shoulder while he turned away from the light and deployed his makeshift wings to hopefully slow the fall. Closing his eyes, the two proceeded to fall far, far down, with Jaida holding on tight within the spark's arms. The glitches above didn't follow, for they merely stopped at the ledge and then appeared the bow in a sense. Dropping further below, Void could see the light growing brighter and brighter behind his eyelids. This is what he thought to himself, before it all suddenly went dark once more, all ending with a reverberated thud. Opening his oval-shaped eyes, the spark was met to the sight of a black voided space. Above, within the darkness of the sky, he could see the faint outline of hundreds to thousands, maybe even millions, of constellations. They all looked to be white lines connecting through tiny dots, all fading in and out of existence by the second in slow waves. Slowly craning his head back down, Void looked upon his torso, seeing Jaida laying atop him, groaning. Interestingly though, it was only her outline. Jaida looked almost like a character who had been drawn only in line art. Her body outline and features were all there, but her core form was just jet black and devoid of color. Void then realized that he himself looked the same, just a hollowed outline of himself. Freckles? You alright? The spark softly asked. Craning her head up, the two multiversal beings would have been touching noses if they had any. Their now outlined eyes locked on each other as they both realized that they had been okay. Yeah, you? Jaida asked back with a tilt in her head, now taking notice of how they looked. I felt worse, the spark returned. Also, you're crushing my waist. Rolling off, Jaida got up and stood upon one knee and gave a quick, sorry, before gazing forward and falling to a stunned state. Whoa, where are we? She asked while Void turned and propped himself up upon his hands and knees. Looking down, the spark noticed that they had been upon a dim, glowing white floor. It almost looked to be ice, however, was still fairly warm to the touch. Specks of star matter danced within the ominous glow, and even rippled like water when the two of them moved. But it was then, and only then, Void turned his gaze up and fell quiet. His oval-shaped eyes shot wide open in astonishment to what he was taking in. Slowly, standing upon his 2 feet, Void's arms fell limp at his sides as he now marched forward in a stunned disbelief gaze. Void? What is it? Jaida asked as she herself stood to her feet. There before them were hundreds of cracked-apart crystals that went around them in a long, almost arched shape, leading all the way down an almost endless pathway. What was interesting, however, was that each cleared chunk within a crack looked to act as a mirror in a way. For from both sides, left and right, Void and Jaida were able to see their reflections within the strange and mysterious walls of crystallized forms. By Matira, how can this be? How? Void sounded utter starstruck as he walked, now feeling the cracked crystal walls. This is... How had I never... Holy... The spark rambled as he went back and forth between the warm stone glasses, staring into his reflections all the while. Dude, you're kind of freaking me out here. What's got you all worked up? Jaida asked as she crossed her arms and examined the reflections herself, both confused and curious as to where they were. Stopping mid-stutter, Void placed his palm against a set of crystallized stone and slowly turned to face Jaida. Sorry, it all makes sense now. The spark gasped as he looked at her with wide eyes, this statement instantly getting her attention. What? How so? Jaida asked. This place, these formations, how we look? It's an old tale my parents would tell me about, a story written in truth, but a rare occurrence within the lines between space and time. Void began in a baffled sense of words. This place, it's called a mirror space. Tilting her head, Jaida found herself growing confused, wondering what the spark had meant. What's a mirror space? She asked. Mirror spaces are rare occurrences within the Omniverse. They're essentially linchpins between worlds, a singular place where all realities in any way, shape, and form connect. A place where the impossible can be possible. A space where hopes and dreams can be seen. A place perfect for the glitches to make home. Void explained as he walked into the center of the dimensional space. No wonder why the constellations were surrounding this place. It wasn't Salvoheim. It's what was underneath Salvoheim. The spark exclaimed in a shocked state as he looked at all the mirrors around himself. Whoa, did your parents know about this place? Jaida asked as she knocked on a mirror. I don't think any of the sparks did. If they had, we would have escaped through these mirrors instead of our dingy little portal tech. Void replied as he held the back of his head within both hands. The glitch must have sensed this place from their realm. You see those broken mirrors? This is what they've been using to travel. Void exclaimed again as he pointed at several shattered rocks that sparked with red static and looked to be sprouting ruby-red colored veins trying to get inside other mirrors. It all makes sense now. How they traveled through the pattern, why they ravaged my world. They were searching for this place, this gateway in the other realms. Salvaheim must have just grown over this place. With all the worlds practically touching in one spot, it would make sense on how a dimension in between would form. By Matira, I understand now. Void slowed in his words, almost falling to tears. This whole time, the answers were just below my feet. Why hadn't I thought it sooner? Turning, the spark gazed upon one of the mirrors, watching as its interior began to glow and shimmer with something inside. Looking close, the spark watched a world appear and a scenario begin to take place. He knew what it was. A reflection world. A different reality, with a different void from somewhere in the vast, far-off regions of the Omniverse. A place where it would possibly take light years to reach. Within the reflection, Void watched as a variant of himself held someone close in his arms. The variant of himself looked to be him if he were to keep his younger attire when growing up. He had a green hat and a colored body type, with grays and darker colored clothes making up its form. He even had a singular black eye with a visible fake mustache. A sword lay by the reflection's side, while fire and rubble danced around his build. The other Void had been sobbing as a woman appeared to be fading away within his arms in a spectacle of blues. It was clear that they had just passed on. The current Void couldn't make out who she had been, but either way, this was a reflection that wasn't so kind in his favor. On the other side of the spectrum, Jaida looked into her own reflection, seeing a world where she was older and having a life with her family, the family that had been lost to the night of 1,000 flames. It looked to be Christmas time. They were having a blast, opening presents, singing songs. The Jaida variant had even been playing her guitar while singing Christmas carols. Tears swelling, Jaida slowly began to raise her hand, wanting to reach in and join them. To see them again. As her fingers softly scraped against the rippling glass, Void came in and gently stopped her from going through. Turning, she gazed into his eyes, whilst he shook his head, silently saying no. The mirror space allows us to take a glimpse into our other lives, but to enter those lives ourselves could destroy those realities. The multiverse may be vast, but sometimes there are just some worlds we can't cross into. I know you want to see them again, but that isn't your world to take part in. I'm sorry. Void apologized as he took hold of Jaida's hands, turning her away from the sight. No, I understand. I get it. She replied before wiping a set of small tears. It was then there came a sharp crack from behind. Turning, both her and Void looked upon a cracking form of lines that created the outline of a fat, diamond-shaped mirror. Within moments, it sparked to life with a red glow and erupted with vines that held it open. A cold chill ran across the two of them as static and glitching particles danced from its form, almost beckoning the two of them to cross through. Looking at the large mirror, and then to one another, the two beings nodded as they knew what this was. It was a calling for a final confrontation, but with who or what had yet to be seen. The mysterious voice didn't come, as there was no need to ask. Whatever or whoever the source was, knew that this was their decision. There it is, Void said as they stood side by side. Slowly reaching down with her left hand, Jaida gently gripped it around Void's, who couldn't help but interlock his fingers in return. Once caring contact was made, Void was in his blues and Jaida in her oranges. Slowly, the two of them began to march forward, together as one. At the halfway point, Jaida decided to ask something. Void, if we don't make it out of this, would it be alright if I try to ask you just one more riddle? The musician asked in a soft voice. Looking at her with gentle eyes, Void nodded. Of course. Let's see if you can crack me one last time. The spark said with a smile. Alright. I can break. I can be clogged. I can be attacked. I can be given. I can be kept, can be crushed, yet I can be whole at the same time. What am I? Jaida asked, looking at the spark, who to her surprise actually looked stumped. Huh. I don't know. The Spark replied with stunned eyes. Smiling, Jaida turned to face Void, proceeding to then raise her right hand up and poke it upon the Spark's chest. It's a heart, she answered, while the red glow shined upon them. Looking down at her finger and then back up to her eyes, Void couldn't help but smile and chuckle, in turn making Jaida do the same. Not bad, Jaida Woods. Not bad at all. The Spark finished as they both turned and proceeded to cross the threshold, not just entering any other world, but rather the layer beneath our own, the world of the glitched.